spending however many years it's been trying to bring it to the screen. And I guess I want to start by asking a little bit about the origins. How long has it been since you started working on this, and what was it about this story that made you kind of willing to be so tenacious and just see it through?
Around 10 years ago, that Peter Morgan, the writer, called me. He said, "Do you like playing Queen?" Yes, he said, "I'm writing a script on spec, and nobody else writes. I'm the right guy to do a movie like this." Excuse me, sir. To the mic. Sorry, can you guys hear me now? Yeah. So I met with Brian May, Roger Taylor, and this guy in Miami Beach in a restaurant in London close to a decade ago. And the first question I had for them was, can we portray for a film that Freddie got diagnosed with HIV before Live Aid? The natural history was just after Live Aid. And they said yes. And I said, well, I think we've got a film. And that was, close to 10 years ago.
So what was it about this story? Was it the band's music? Was it Freddie Mercury's story? What was it about it that was so, compelling to you?
It was everything. To me, it had all the ingredients of a feature film. Yes, I mean, what Freddie does so amazingly well is bring people together through his music. I thought if we could capture that in the theatre, then we have a good film. Also, the fact that not a lot of people around the world really knew Freddie's life. And he's so beloved, you don't really meet people that say, I don't like Mercury. So I thought we could teach young people. It was always going to be a PG-13, crowd-pleasing, foot-stamping story, and that we could carry on Freddie's legacy to a whole new generation, people that don't know who Freddie is. And so to me, it had all the ingredients. Hollywood really didn't see it that way. It took me a long time, and I think every studio passed, enough, or Fox and New Regency luckily stepped in.
And John, what was your relationship to Queen before you started doing this? Were you a fan? Were you not?
I admittedly discovered Queen when I saw Flash Gordon. But then, of course, after I became a fan of theirs, and I realized, oh, they did that song too, that all the songs I'd known already, of course, but hadn't connected it. So, I tell the same story. It's like I became a huge fan of Jerry Goldsmith, who was a luminary film composer when I saw Star Trek motion picture Alien, and then went back to the 60s and started collecting his film scores. So it's very similar to that happened with Queen as well for me.
And so what was your initial response when you read the script for this? I mean, what did you see looming ahead as sort of both the opportunities and the challenges that you were going to face?
Well, I'm a natural born warrior, so I'm always like, holy shit, what am I going to do? A film. I mean, every film there's a way to pulling it off, But this one, because of the iconic person who existed, and the love for the music and so forth, you want to do it right, and there's a sort of gravity to it, it's an important story.
Well, in terms of doing it right, so you mentioned that Brian May and Roger Taylor were on board relatively early. I mean, how extensive was their involvement throughout the process, and what did that bring to the movie?
They were champions because, first of all, they were so patient. Because we had a few stop starts. There was a lot of press about who was playing Freddie 7-8 years ago. None of that was true. But they were so supportive, and then I don't think Brian May actually thought the film would actually get made. I think we bluffed him out when I said it's actually happening. I saw a very nervous Brian and Roger, but they were amazing, so supportive, and throughout my whole career, the most nervous I've ever been was the Sunday morning Soho when I screened Brian and Roger the movie for the first time. And I didn't watch the screen once, I just was watching them. It's like 3 of us in the theater.
What was their initial reaction?
He was watching you all the way through, by the way. He does that.
They were, it went completely silent afterwards, and they just stood up and they loved it. They said we're really proud of it. And so for me as a producer who gets the life rights to these iconic characters, I feel that burden to deliver. And thank God, they really enjoyed the film.
Well, Rami Malek's performance has rightfully gotten a lot of attention, but watching the movie again tonight, what struck me is I think the key to what makes the movie work is the chemistry between all four of those guys. I mean, really all four of them are terrific performances. They're all so great together, and I'm curious what the casting process was like. How long did it take you to find that exact right combination of four guys, and how did you know when you had it?
First of all, Rami, this guy that works for me, Dennis O'Sullivan, called me one day. I was in London shooting. He said, I think I found our Freddie. I said, who's that? He said, Rami Malek. I said, who's that? And I said, does he sing? He said, no. Does he dance? No. Does he play the piano? No. He's from Sherman Oaks. Perfect. But I flew back the following weekend, and Rami and I spent 6 hours in my office on a Saturday evening. And he wasn't auditioning at all, but you could just see there was something in him that could create this kind of guy, and just his willingness to do it, and his passion to do it, and just the way, natural DNA of who Rami is, there's a lot of Freddie in him. And after this 6-hour meeting, I turned around to Dennis and I said, I'm still not sure, maybe he needs to put himself on tape. And about 3 days later, I get this iPhone video of Rami feeding Freddie Mercury. He's talking one of his interviews on YouTube. And that was it. I mean, we were done. That was it for me. That was our Freddie. And even we didn't have the film greenlit. We had no idea what was going to happen. I sent Rami to London and to start working with a movement coach and a voice coach and everything else, and dialect coach, and we were just doing it. And he was very good. The film's going to get made, right? I'm not just working it for nothing. Of course it will. We've had many hurdles on this film. I'm sure some of you have read. So to me, it was just another hurdle to cross to get the film made. But I was whatever it took to get this film made, I was going to do it.
Well, you said something interesting on the Blu-ray from the movie. I was watching the interviews with you, and you were saying on there that for you, what key to the movie was casting Brian May properly, right? As much as, if not more than Freddie Mercury. I'm curious why you felt that. What was so important about getting that part right away?
I mean, it was just Brian May is larger-than-life character that's still around now. He still has the same hair, and it was always, can we find the right actor without it becoming too comedic in a way? And Susie Figgis, who's the most amazing casting agent in London, director in London, casts a lot of my movies out there. She just sent Willem along. I was sitting in this office. We were sitting in an office, and I was kind of on the phone and emailing, how you do like this. And I didn't realize that he was standing there for about 3 or 4 minutes. And I just looked up and I apologized. I said, would you like a tea or coffee? And he went into Brian. He was Brian. And I just fell off my chair and blown away. And that performance, unbelievable. All of them. So it kind of went like that. And then 4 months before we started shooting, I sent all the guys to live in my house in the countryside for like 3 weeks so they could become a family and live together. And now they're inseparable. They travel everywhere together. And they are a family. But it's just amazing that the chemistry between them.
Yeah, no, I mean, all the performances are fantastic, and I do feel like, editing can make or break a performance. I mean, a bad editor can ruin a good performance, and a good editor can help a okay one. And I'm curious, John, how you see your role as an editor in terms of responsibility for the performances. I mean, how do you take raw materials that these actors give you and sort of mold it to find the best version of those performances?
Well, that's exactly what I do, is to find the best versions of the performances I can, or every primo nugget there is. I try to make sure that it's a collection of all the primo nuggets there are of what those actors did. I always say, you can definitely improve performances as an editor, but you're screwed if someone's miscast. And so when I saw the first few days of dailies, I was completely relieved because, as I've mentioned before, one miscast person and you're basically polishing that turd for a year. And it's sort of a weight that bogs you down for the whole movie, and you know that the film will never achieve the greatness it could have simply because they may be a great actor, but they just weren't right for the part. So it was a huge relief when I saw the chemistry among them, and it was working now. I could just mold my clay and not worry about having a problem, that problem.
One thing I think that you did really well in this movie is just hit the exact right tonal balance where, as you say, it's a crowd pleaser, a foot stomp or whatever, but then it's got, it pauses for moments of poignancy at just the right times. It pauses for it has comedy at just the right time. And I'm curious for you, is that, finding that kind of tonal balance, is that just intuitive? Is it challenging? I mean, how much trial and error was there with this movie and getting that pitch just right?
It's always trial and error when people talk about editing in terms of the micro editing, the sequences, the coolness of those moments. But an editor's responsibility also is to have the macro view of the film. And then that's when you really sit back and you know whether the peaks and valleys are working, if it's, one part's too dead, one part's too serious. And this movie, we wanted it to be cathartic, we wanted it to be really emotional, but we wanted you to laugh as well, because it's, the underlying thread of it is sort of tragic in a way, but you're supposed to celebrate his life. It's sort of like a funeral. You go and you're mourning the death of this person because of what could have been, but you're celebrating what was. And with Freddie, there was a lot of what was behind him. So it was, like we say all the time, the film was, at the end of the day, was supposed to be a celebration. And I think, so when there were humorous moments and so forth that the actors gave, we really just wanted to use those to let the audience know, when things get too dark, you're still allowed to have fun.
Well, one of the most fun, triumphant sequences in the movie, obviously, is the Live Aid sequence. And I was shocked to read that was the first thing you guys shot. It seems like kind of a overwhelmingly,
Yeah, the actors weren't too happy about that. But for some logistic reasons, we had to do it that way, and it just worked out perfect in the end because it just brought not just them together, but brought the whole crew together. Everybody just working on this film got so excited after those 6-7 days of Live Aid. I think we did a song a day, and at the end of it, I went back to the studio and said, we need another day because I want them to do the whole set, which is on the DVD, by the way. I'll be a producer for switching the DVD. And as I said, coming out of that, everyone kind of was so excited about that we knew then what we had and going forward and their performances. I mean, Rami's performance, if you put him side by side with Freddie, it's unbelievable. To play that iconic character, and to have Brian May and Roger Taylor standing there, and Bob Geldof showed up, the producer of Live Aid showed up, and everything. There was a lot of weight to be put on his shoulders.
And logistically, I think it's extremely complicated. I mean, where did you shoot that, and how many extras did you have? I mean, was it mostly, extras put in like effects?
Yeah, it's mostly digital. Wembley's not Wembley anymore. It's rebuilt. It's Live Aid. So we shot it actually in an airstrip in London, just outside London. We had about 2,000 extras or something like that. But again, it was setting the tone for the rest of the film, and having them getting their characters that way first really worked out.
Well, and John, what was your experience of editing that sequence? I mean, I would think that you must have also felt kind of a weight knowing that the whole movie's going to hinge on.
Yeah, I mean, because we shot it first, it kept me up at night for a year because, whether I was middle of the night going to pee, I was worried about what Live Aid. And sing the Queen song, of course, because I did it in your head all day long. But, I was, basically the film would have collapsed if that sequence didn't work and leave people feeling emotionally exhausted and in a good way. So I just, like I said, I'm a natural born worrier. I just worried constantly about it. Any waking moment I had, I would work on it. I've always referred to it as the Death Star sequence for Bohemian Rhapsody because everything leads to it, it's talked about. What about Live Aid? Did you hear about Live Aid? Oh my God, Live Aid, the film starts off with Live Aid. There's no expectations there whatsoever, you know. So, yeah, so it was something that I definitely worry about all the time. But, you know, it took many different shapes because we had visual effects concerns and, you know, length, yeah, budget, things like that. But in the end, you know, it's interesting, you know, how you complain as filmmakers and how you're restricted by budget or visual effects, but actually worked to help the scene evolve because I sort of held back on the crowd shots and then as the concert evolved, we, you know, basically opened it up and had Freddie be more one with his audience, which I was hoping that we would be left with. Where basically, I think by the time We Are the Champions comes on, he's completely in communication with his audience. You know, they're one. You know.
So how did the visual effects and the budget affect your editing? I mean, was it that you felt like you wanted more crowd shots than you had?
Of course I did, but you know what I was saying. But in the end, it actually worked out because my original version of Live Aid, of course, I mean, as soon as we get there, you know, I'm showing off the stage, and even the sliver is like 50 grand because you have to fill it in with people. And so I did a series of things, blowing up shots and so forth, to keep the integrity of what my first assembly was. And then, you know, but there was a decree to cut about $1 million out of my first assembly, which we did. But in the end, it ends up working out. You know, although the 20-minute version is pretty cool, so be sure to watch it.
But for scenes like that, or some of the other sequences where there's footage that exists, do you watch that? Do you watch Live Aid? Do you try to put it out of your mind?
No, I mean, literally a year before I finished the film, I watched Live Aid once just to refamiliarize myself with it, but I didn't really want to get influenced by it because it's the story of our movie, and I think the idea was, otherwise just watch Live Aid, you know. So it was, if you're a fly on the wall or you're behind the stage, or you know, you could see it from a different vantage point, and also from an emotional vantage point with the characters in the movie, you know, Mary and Jim, and even Jim Beach, and of course his mother.
Well, Graham, I asked John about, you know, his role with the actors, and I asked you about the casting, but I'm curious, in terms of on set with a movie like this, where, like you say, there's such a burden on Rami and the other actors, you know, what's your role as producer in terms of facilitating the kind of environment that helps them, that you know, takes as much of the pressure off of them as possible? I mean, how do you deal with the actors?
This was of all the films I've done in my career, this was a different type of film, producing, and you know, filmmaking, as we all know, is a collaboration, but this one took that to a level way beyond anyone's ever imagined. And you know, it was just every day kind of going through what we were shooting, the excitement of sometimes stuff was really funny, a lot of, you know, ad-lib from the actors, that line in the Airstream back at the stage when he said, you know, what do we think of David? I think he's gay. That was, you know, Rami just ad-libbing on the day. You know, a lot of fun when actors do that, but it's for this one it was about getting their performances, having different actors show up. Mike Myers was a jam to come up for a few days and play his role, and so it was mainly about just kind of running the show and making sure the performances were on. And it was such a passion project for me. That was so, you know, when I stood on that Live Aid set for the first time and they were rehearsing, I just broke down. I've never broken down on a movie before, not for that reason anyway. But this one, again, it was, you know, I've been saying publicly that Freddie's been throwing hurdles at me for the last 10 years and hasn't stopped yet. Every time you think, you know, the drama's died down, there's another piece of drama on this movie to come along. But you just, you go through it because you're so passionate about it. And we had the best team. Everyone, I'm sure, says that in their films, but we really did have the best team. And this guy, what he did, he's a lifesaver. Because that's why we're here to watch this guy cut. And it's just unbelievable. Rami's performance, everybody just kind of rolled their sleeves up to get it done.
It's a labor of love.
Right. And what their asses off, I mean, incredible.
Well, another sequence I wanted to ask you about, John, that I really love in this movie is the sort of creation of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
And like I really
mention that one.
what's that?
I was hoping you were going to mention that one. It's my favorite scene in the film, other than Live Aid.
Oh, good. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about the process of cutting that sequence together.
Well, we were talking about actors doing improv, and so the cornerstone of that scene was really when they would go off the script, and it's testament to the chemistry they had with each other, because an actor would say something off the script, and the other would respond as if they were literally that person. So that's the chemistry they had. So for me, it was when actors do that, of course, it's a blessing and a curse, because it's both a nightmare, but it's also what you would hope would happen. So and a lot of times an actor Ronnie would throw out a line that the actor he's giving it to is no longer there, and so you have to sort of like script out, because I want to preserve every joke and everything they said if possible. So you re-script it out in the editing room, and then you kind of fake reactions or whatever, or come up with wild lines to sort of pull it off together. So when I know a sequence is really good, I have this weird thing, is I get really pissed off, because I figured immediately someone's going to mess with it and fuck it up. So I half of the sequence I'm cutting in anger, so I was it's like when I write a piece of music, if it's a really good cue, halfway through I'm just pissed off, because I know it's going to get ruined by somebody. But this sequence, it didn't change the frame from the original assembly, because it's a crowd pleaser. So when we tested it, where I was on pins and needles and just sure that a grenade was going to be thrown into it, despite its length, it stayed intact.
So the preview, I've never seen anything like it, where we previewed in Chicago, and just the audience. And years ago, I had a couple of streaming companies that really wanted to finance this film. Fantastic financial deal for me, and my lawyers are like, you should take this deal. But it was always about, like I said earlier, creating an atmosphere in the theater that brings people together. And coming out feeling uplifted, although it's a heavily emotional story, you still can't come out feeling good about it.
Yeah, I'm really glad you didn't take those streaming deals. I think after watching the movie tonight,
Honestly, some of the critics, and I have to say this, that panned us, and that it's not dark enough, it's not about Freddie's sexuality enough, and that's streaming at best in today's world we live. We always set out, as I said, to make a PG-13 crowd pleaser, something you can take your kids to and really enjoy it. It's called entertainment.
Well, so you said you had these great reactions at the test screenings and stuff. What kinds of things did you learn from the test screening? I mean, were there things that didn't work that you had to adjust? Or?
I'd never put cards up on a film, or did the Muhammad Ali movie and a Howard Hughes movie, and I always was like the kind of producer that doesn't like cards at the end. And I remember we came out of that screening in Chicago and said, the audience really want to learn more about Jim Hutton. They want to know what happened with Mary, and he said we've got to put some cards up, and that's what we did. So for me, that was the most important thing coming out of screenings. But like I said, from day one, we were scoring in the 90s, which I was, said I'd never seen before.
And was that material with Mary and Jim Hutton, was that stuff that you already had, you said put back in, or did you have to do any of
No, it was mainly the cards at the end and explaining that Freddie's
I see what you're saying.
like with Jim. Because you usually just, as a producer, you just want to say Google it.
Right.
But this felt like it wanted.
Well, John, you brought up composing music, which usually you compose the scores for the movies you edit. This one, as far as I can tell, there's really no score. It's all just kind of source music and clean. And I'm curious, was that always the plan, or did you come into this thinking you were going to compose a score, and what happened?
Well, I always come in. That's the plan was for me to do both. But I had a little thing in the back of my head when I read the script. Like, there's no score in this movie, but maybe there is. My agent would say, no, there's always score in these films. It's going to be score. I'm like, okay, but the writing was on the wall, I guess, halfway through making the film, and Graham and I look at each other like that, and there's no score in this film. Because, and also, I just felt, I'm saying as a film composer, I just felt it would be movie of the week to put film music in, the underscoring scenes and so forth, and the film would sort of not be as timeless anymore if it wasn't pure, clean music. So where there was going to be film music, I put opera in, because Freddie listened to a lot of opera, and so that carried those sequences and made them more poignant, of course, than the score would have. When he goes and sees the The Doctor, I cobbled together Who Wants to Live Forever, took out the vocal tracks and used that to score the scene. And then one of the best examples of how, if you don't have to use score, don't, was in the breakup scene where Love of My Life is on the TV set. No one will ever notice the work, of course, but it was very, very carefully designed, so the most devastating moments of that concert would be on key moments in the breakup scene. And score could never have done that. And then became, of course, a very, very sensitive mixing issue. The TV's too loud, you're not watching the scene between Mary and Freddie, but too soft, it's not having the devastating effects. And we spent hours mixing that scene.
Well, when you're spending all those hours mixing scenes like that, how do you kind of retain your objectivity about knowing whether it's working or not? Or do you bring in other people to kind of watch it at different points, or how does that work?
No, we really didn't bring in other. I mean, again, it's used a lot with audiences. I mean, we work together every day during that time.
Yeah, I mean, you can get to it in the weeds, but I mean, I think all it takes is backing up a few scenes to watch it again, But no, but we would, God knows, we'd watch this thing from A to Z, all the time, and we were obviously as critical of it as anybody was. So.
Graham, one thing I meant to ask you at the beginning, and I sort of forgot, was in terms of the evolution of the screenplay. A movie like this, I feel like one of the toughest things about a biopic is, figuring out what you're going to keep in, what you're going to leave out. A movie like this, you're going to get Queen fans. Like even someone like myself who loves the movie, I'm still like, well, why isn't Flash Gordon in there? Why aren't why are certain songs missing? Why are certain albums missing? Whatever. What was the evolution like in terms of deciding where the focus was going to be and what was going to make it in?
Well, honestly, that's what took so long, and it always does when you get the life rights to somebody or a band, especially as iconic as this. It's a jigsaw, it's a giant jigsaw, because you figure you've got to have a 2.5 hour movie, and so you've got to sacrifice, and you've got to move things around and dates around, and then putting in ultimately the music. It's all driven by the music. So I think from day one, from the very first draft of this script, it was bookended by Live Aid. That we always knew was our start of the film and then our third act set piece. But there was moments, that myself and Dennis and a few writers would sit around and just come up with ideas and come up with different ways. And of course, bring in Brian and Roger and Jim Beach and talk about moments, whether they fit in the film or they didn't. We actually shot young Freddie growing up in Zanzibar and going off to school in Mumbai. And when we saw the cut, we saw the way John look at me like that. John put it together.
I love Zanzibar.
And he did, yes. And Dad says everything in the lunch about Freddie growing up, and so we figured we didn't need it. I mean, again, you've got to make those decisions, and they're tough decisions to make. And we would sit around for hours talking about it, flashbacks and problems. So it's really driven by how you feel the pacing of the film is. What is that film? What is the right tone? And obviously, again, driven by the music. But it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to craft 2.5 hours out of someone's life.
Well, given that you said, this movie was so many challenges over the years and it kind of kept coming and all that, I'm curious from both of you, at what point, because obviously now I feel like it must have exceeded any expectations you had for it in terms of its finding an audience and everything. And I'm curious, at what point did you guys realize that it was all worth it, that the movie was going to be this phenomenon and was working?
I would say the first test screenings, because you got something that people are reacting in the way that you're reacting to your own film. Because you can be so close to it, and it could be something that everyone else hates. But I guess it was then I really knew we had something. I kind of knew it anyway. I mean, as I said, as soon as I saw the cast, I always felt that we had something. From even when I was just calling it together in the very early days.
It's been the most surreal 4 or 5 months since this film came out, and just leading up to it. It's hard to put into words. We want to go with it. I mean, this is kind of like crazy because there's a lot of people out there that, you know, from the press and just kind of throwing things at us all the time, and we just keep kind of overcoming it. And I remember we came out of we had the premiere of Wembley Arena. There's 7,000 people there. The world premiere, and coming out of there, we started to get all the critics talking about the film, and there was a lot of pretty bad reviews. And I remember Brian May turning around and going, "Don't worry, they hated the song as well. They killed the song." And I was very worried because obviously that's true. You spend 10 years of your life and you're reading this going, "Wait, I didn't see the same movie as them." But the audience has spoken, and the audience around the globe have said, "This is entertainment. This is why we want to go to the theater. It's not just about Marvel." And this film has done Marvel numbers, which is great for our business. It's not just about Netflix. So you can create something, and if it hits that note, and if it just pushes that wave, I mean, it's just been amazing. You know, I think 9% of the population of South Korea have seen this movie. Astounding records all over the globe. And I don't want to sound potentially cocky here, but I was always away in Hollywood saying, "This is Queen." And we know how popular Queen are, and it's not just about they play their songs at sporting events. And I think, you know, the marketing, I think, was unbelievably great, and just everything came together in such a way, and we're sitting here, and like, these people still coming to see the film. They came out in November.
Well, I'm glad you stuck with it. It's a great movie, and I want to thank you guys for coming out and talking with us about it.